what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Naya, and I am so excited that you have joined us again for another episode of Off the Record. We have had such a great time. This is a place where we talk about real issues, sometimes hard conversations about current events, but from a biblical point of view. And today, I'm so excited. I have a wonderful woman, a wife, a mother, an entrepreneur, a professional, and she's just dope. And she's my friend. This is Dr. Karla Evans.
Oh, I love you, Naya.
We need a studio audience. Hey, clap it up, clap it up.
Hey, kudos to you. It's an honor to be here. Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Y'all, I stalked her. So she watched one of the episodes and sent an encouraging word. And I was like, so do you want to be on? Because I have experienced her, I'll call it a ministry, but she is a professional, but I believe that it is a ministry that helps thousands of people. And so I want to introduce you to her. And today we are talking about mental health. Mental health. It is so important. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Yes, before we get started, I just want you to kind of tell everybody about yourself a little bit, and then we'll get into it.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, I'm Dr. Karla Evans, clinical psychologist. Been working in the field over a decade. I spent most of my career working with the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So working with the disenfranchised population, oftentimes those societies given up on, and felt like I got my wings and my foundation and all the things through that experience. Met my amazing business partner, Dr. Veronica Tedderton.
Shout out to Dr. Tedderton.
Love her with all my heart. Love her with all my heart. And we have launched Anticipate Joy, which is an online, so it's telehealth. And it's just available in a more convenient, flexible way for adults, individuals, and couples.
Absolutely.
And we reach out to people all across the state of Texas. She and I also work with veterans. That's kind of our side hustle to help us fund the business that we've been building for the last 2 years. So
I love that.
We've got our hands in a few different pots, but it's exciting. And when you're passionate about it, it never feels like work.
It never feels like work. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Anticipate Joy in a second. But I don't know, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like in the last few years, we've gotten more comfortable with talking about mental health. I remember growing up, it was not talked about at all. Somebody was either crazy or senile. It was just kind of like this blanket disposal of people who did not act like us, or they had some sort of difference in the way that they live. But I don't know, the last 5 years, 10 years, we've gotten more comfortable with talking about mental health. Why do you think that is? Is that an accurate statement that it's more acceptable to talk about?
Yeah, I would say it's absolutely accurate. I think we're doing a much better job in 2020 to help reduce the stigma by communicating about it.
Yes.
I think there's still work to be done because regardless of how much we're talking about it in society, in the pulpits, there's still the fear and shame associated with, I have a mental illness, that means I'm crazy, I'm weak, something's wrong with me. What happens if people know about that?
Right.
Just think about it in the workplace, for example, even in a church setting.
Okay.
If you're suffering from mental illness, you have depression, have anxiety, and you go to your supervisor and you say, hey, I need to talk with someone, the three immediate fears come up. One, how am I going to be viewed? So is this going to negatively impact my performance evaluations?
Yes.
Number two, would I ever be open for a promotion now that people know there's something wrong with me? And ultimately, number three, am I going to be able to maintain my employment here? Because now people see me as, and as much as we want to pray in the church,
come on,
we know people behind the scenes are, Naya, I just want you to, just a matter of prayer. Can you pray for Susie over here because she's going through depression?
Yes.
And before you know it, it's turned into a gossip session.
Ooh, okay. Here we are, okay? Right away, here we are. And I think that is so important. I do not believe that psychology and theology are mutually exclusive. I believe that they have a lot to do with one another. And before I continue, I've been reading this book, and it's just called Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived.
Yes.
Okay, it's by Mark Baker, PhD. And it just offers so much insight as to the psychological prowess of Jesus. He was a very relational person, but every time he dealt with people, it was from the inside out about how you're thinking, and as a man thinketh, so is he, and the renewing of your mind, and all of these things. And for so long, I believe that they've been separate. You know?
Can I just mention something real quick when you
Please.
said renewing of your mind? So my goal when I started this mission, I can tell you as a 5-year-old, I wanted to be a Christian counselor. Just wanted to mediate, fix situations. How do we find a solution? And then that led into me becoming a licensed psychologist.
I love that. I wanted to be a mermaid.
You want to be a mermaid, and you are a mermaid.
I wanted to be a
Look at
mermaid.
her.
Hence the shoes for today. Okay, clinical
So
psychologist.
I just want to mention my mission has always been, how do I integrate my faith with my clinical practice? Like, how do I merge the two?
Yes.
And if you know anything about most psychologists, and I hate to say most, but many psychologists, they believe behind the science of it, and that if you are a Christian, then that means that either you're weak or you're not believing the scientific evidence behind some of the things that happen.
Okay.
What I believe as a believer
Yeah.
is that evidence-based practice like cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a very highly used technique
Okay.
in the mental health field,
Okay.
is biblical. If you think about the verse you just said, renewing your mind, cognitive behavioral therapy is challenging and disputing irrational beliefs that come into your mind that ultimately cause consequences of depression, anxiety, and worse.
Oh,
So it's biblical, going right back to Jesus as the greatest therapist.
okay, you don't have to send in an offering for this, but I think we're all feeling like we're getting some free therapy today. Yeah, I completely agree that they're not mutually exclusive, and I think the more we talk about it, because so many times it's like, you know, not claiming it. That's what I heard a lot growing up. Now, let me say this. I did grow up in a house where my dad, he is a social worker, therapist, and psychologist. So in the culture, we didn't talk about it, but in my house, we talked about it all the time. And that's the way that he and my mom raised us, to talk about our feelings, about what we're feeling, and really processing things that we were experiencing. But so many times it's like, no, don't claim that headache. No, don't claim that sickness. Don't claim it. Don't say it. And I think that that's caused a lot of trauma. And I would even dare say, now this is just me, it's really messed with my idea about miracles and signs and wonders. We always talk about it. But I think that there's a very practical way of operating in spirit and in truth. I think about the woman at the well. And, you know, Jesus having an interaction with her, and him telling her to go and get your husband.
Yeah.
That would have been a good time for her, you know, to say, well, no, I don't, I'll go get him, or I'll go, and not be honest about what's going on in her life. But she said, I don't have a husband. And she said, yeah. He said, you know, basically calling her out. The one you're with is not, you've had a lot, and the one you're with is not your husband. But then he goes on to say that God is spirit, and they that worship him have to worship in spirit and in truth. And we know that the truth is the word of God, but there are also some truths about our lives. Yeah. I believe God is a healer. Absolutely. And I have a headache.
Absolutely.
I believe he's faithful. And I'm dealing with some imbalances in my brain.
Yes.
So
it's the same as cancer. It's the same as, if I tell people all the time, our brain is one of the most important organs in our body. And if we believe and we widely accept the practice of going to get your knee replaced, then why wouldn't we widely accept for us to get mental health help?
Yes.
It's the very same thing. And if this doesn't get fixed, if it remains broken, then what happens is we're literally entering the churches, and we are having a toxic environment going out to people that are coming in hungry and hurting to get wholeness and to get help. So we ultimately, we have to recognize it as one of the most important organs in our bodies, and we have to make it a priority. Yeah. Just as we would wear glasses if our vision was failing us.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And I think we're understanding that there are so many nuances. I think 2020 is the year of X-ray vision. Okay, we're seeing things we don't even want to see.
Couldn't have said it better, for sure.
Good night.
Yeah.
But we're realizing that things aren't as black and white, no pun intended, black and white as we once thought they were. Yeah. You know, there are nuances to the way people behave and the way people think, and even what we grew up, you know, believing and thinking. It is a very limited view. Yeah. It's a perspective. And so I was thinking about this and talking with one of our, actually our worship director, and we were talking about the different things that people come into church with. And as a worship leader, you just want to get everybody on the same page so we can all lift our hands and love Jesus. But it's like people are coming in with bad news. They're coming in with chemical imbalances. They're coming in with hormonal changes.
Yes.
And you have to not rectify, but try to get everybody on the same. You can't beat up the people but they didn't respond today and worship wasn't great. No, there's an inner work that's going on. People are going through a lot, especially in this crazy year.
Well, I love you brought up church, because I think that we have this view that everyone is supposed to be perfect. And I think that really hinders, especially those that are in ministry, because I am supposed to, like you said, I'm okay, don't speak it, don't proclaim it. So ultimately, I'm living a lie. And if I dare tell somebody that I'm suffering, if I dare tell somebody that I am depressed or that I'm feeling hopeless, then I am not living up to the pastor or the preacher or the youth leader that I'm called to be.
Yeah.
And we have to eliminate that stigma. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is hard conversations like this and addressing it, and then embracing people, validating where they're at, providing empathy, letting them know. Empathy, like, I don't know where you're at and I don't know what you're going through, but I want to walk this road with you. And I want you to know you're going to be whole on the other side of this.
You mentioned something that's so important. Let's talk depression and anxiety. To be completely candid, I've dealt with depression in my life. I can pinpoint maybe 3 times where I can remember. Pretty sure it's been more than that. But from the time where I've started counting, there have been 3 moments. And what it's looked like for me wasn't what I thought depression was. I thought depression was like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, and you're just kind of walking around. Mine was very functional. I still laughed. I still had a great time. But I did feel very apathetic and numb, uninspired, and just kind of walking around going through the motions, like almost like The Walking Dead. And so depression and anxiety, we're hearing anxiety a lot more. And let me say this too before you answer. Even with my children, I'm learning, sometimes my daughter will say, "Mommy, my stomach hurts," and usually I'm like, okay, go to the bathroom. But sometimes they're dealing with things that just their little baby bodies and baby hearts, like, I'm feeling something, I don't know how to articulate it or have language for it. But it could be little triggers that trigger anxiety even in youth. But because we've grown up in the era that we did, it's like, no, just drink some water. Just have some medicine. Go to the bathroom. It's like, no, we've been dealing with this for a while.
Well, and then all those physiological symptoms come out. And as you know, very widely in different cultures, mental health is not accepted.
Especially in the African-American
cultures, Hispanic cultures. Sometimes it's like, we'll go to a medical doctor, or you need to pray through. So there's different, how we look at how we respond to exactly what you're saying. I've worked with so many families where they'll say, every single day, my child is coming home with a stomach ache. Every morning when I wake them up for school, they're coming home with a stomach ache. And instead of just saying, come on, we got to get going, because we're always in that rush, move, we're also creating more anxiety in their lives. We're not asking the questions, what was happy today? What was sad today? What made you laugh today? What made you confused today? Going through those questions, understanding what's happening and when the trigger started. When did this all start? Because then that's going to cause us to not say, go to the bathroom, get a drink.
Right.
We're going to be able to sit down, and before we know it, we may be resolving those situations. So back to the depression and anxiety. I love you brought that up, because it's not just with children. Depression can look that way. Depression can look very physiological, and you don't. Sometimes we think, well, depression is, I've got a loaded gun and I want to commit suicide. Depression can take on so many different forms. It can take on, I'm isolating more. There's low motivation.
Yes.
So you may find someone going off to college, and before you know it, you walk in their dorm room and it's just filthy. So no more interest or self-care. I'm not taking care of me or valuing the importance of that. So I think the piece in the church, to bring it back to the church, is what I want to dispel is, and this may be controversial, but so often people say, well, you just got to have enough faith to rebuke the depression out of your life. If you had enough faith, or if you had a strong enough prayer life, then your depression wouldn't be here. We are setting people up for failure. And why? Why did one of the major pastors in our United States end his life last year?
Yeah.
Because he believed, I'm a martyr for Christ. I can't take a sabbatical. God forbid I practice self-care. I have to always be available 24/7. And how can you possibly give out when your tank is empty?
When your tank is empty.
And how many months was he walking around with his tank empty and suffering, but so afraid to tell anybody about it? Because what happens if I take those walls down? Then all of a sudden I'm vulnerable and I'm weak and I'm not the mega pastor that everyone expects me to be.
Yeah.
You know, so that kind of mentality there, I think, is hard.
Let's just take a breath, because I think even rest, the idea of rest. I grew up always hearing, like, you'll sleep when you're dead. Grind time. It's time. Rise and grind.
I know.
Like, if y'all don't just lay down, we need to sleep.
Thank you.
We need rest. Rest is worship.
Yes.
God himself. Who do you think you are? God himself said, I've been working 6 days. I'm off today. Who do we believe that we are to not require rest? Sabbath is a form of worship. It's a commandment. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And so I would just take a moment to implore every pastor, every leader. This is just from a lay member. We want you to rest. We want you to be okay. Even our pastor here at Trinity Church, he said, I want to end with joy.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to have to end with somebody, carrying me out and preaching my lead, dying at the put. No, end with joy. Yeah. And so please rest. Please rest. And because in that rest, there's so much information. I talk about it from a musical standpoint. There are notes and there are rests. Rests give context and beauty to music. Rest gives context and beauty to life. How do you know what it means if you don't take a time to reflect? And so please rest. Please rest.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, if you're not seeking a professional mental health provider, and again, disclaimer, this is not therapy, this is just conversation, but anytime you walk into a therapist's office, if they're doing a really good job, they're going to take a holistic approach to how they are working to heal the elements in your life. And too much of a good thing is not a good thing. And so sometimes it's the simple questions. In an intake survey, we're going to ask you basic questions. How many hours of sleep are you getting? How much caffeine are you drinking? What kinds of activities are you involved in? How many commitments have you committed to? I know I'm a yes person, so I have a hard time saying no. And before you know it, you've said yes, 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 yes. And then other areas of your life suffer. And we don't think that way because we think, well, if I run every day, if I eat every single thing exactly, all these things right, but you have got to give your body and your mind a chance to reset, to rest, to take care of yourself, to ask for help, to recognize those triggers that are going off in your body. It's all interconnected. So if you are coming down with a cold, if you're seeing things in your physical body begin to suffer, you might want to take a bigger look at what's going on in my life right now, what's happening.
I think a yes to something is always a no to something else. And so, and then not even just what you're doing, but how are you doing it, doing things from a place of fullness. I think we can do a lot. You can do a lot. You can do all the things, but how are you doing it? And are you being led to do it? Every good thing ain't God. And it gets very weird to try to figure out what's good and what's God. I had one incredible counselor, psychologist, tell me that the enemy, if he can't beat you, he'll join you. And so if your thing is not drugs and sex and alcohol, but it's overworking, he'll just light a bunch of fires in front of you because he knows that you will kill yourself to put them out.
And what's the verse? The enemy has come to kill,
steal, and destroy
your life.
Not with the pitchfork, but with things that you love. I love helping people. Yes, sure. I'll come and help you move. And by the time you look up, you are defeated
Yeah.
by doing things that you love doing.
It's his deceptive scheme. He's smart enough to know I'm not going to, stick a pitchfork in front of you because,
Yeah.
we're going to be able to stay away from it. But it's the things that he knows are our triggers and are our weaknesses that are going to be in front of our faces.
I hate him. I hate the devil.
Too.
I hate him. He's dumb. This is already so good. I want to touch on just a couple more things. You mentioned suicide and the pastor that unfortunately ended his life. I think, and I'm not a professional. That's why we're here with the professional. But people who usually commit suicide, they don't want to end their life. They just want to end the pain.
Absolutely.
And so I know that there are triggers. I know that there are, anxieties and things like that. And I would even encourage us in the church, because I grew up hearing one thing: you commit suicide, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
But instead of that blanket statement, being gracious and empathetic to people who are going through, especially those who don't know the Lord. I see why.
Mm-hmm.
Life is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. You have no control over what family you're in, what your story is, what your pathology is, and you go through all of these things. And life with the Lord is hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So without him, it's even harder. But to have a little bit more empathy for those who are really just wanting to end the pain.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's such a tough topic, but I think how we do better, maybe as a whole, is we become more proactive and less reactive.
Okay.
Too often I connect with organizations and companies and even churches, and they say, we need this, we need this, we need this, but nothing severe has happened in our congregation or in our organization. But the minute a tragedy happens, then we run, and it's too late. It's too late.
Yeah.
So be proactive now. Recognize there is never a dollar sign too big to put on your mental health and to put on your well-being. And then as families, for parents who are listening, I would say be careful what you're speaking over your children's lives. Those affirmations can change the course of their future. 800,000 divorces happen every single year. Every single year. And what do we do? Oftentimes we Band-Aid it and we how do we patch it up? How do we fix it here? But they're going through internal pain and they do not know how to communicate that. Yeah. The first part of my career, I worked with children under the age of 12, and they don't do this. They don't do talk therapy. Your 8-year-old's not going to say, Mommy, I don't like how Daddy talked and I don't like how you're reacting. They don't do that.
Right.
But so it was getting down and doing play therapy and playing a game and watching them draw a picture. And before you knew it, you saw the crisis and the trauma that was going on in their life. And so those affirmations that you speak over your children, I'm not against a good movie. I'm not against a good show or taking my phone for a few minutes and doing some video time and screen time. But that affirmation that you speak over them is going to give them life or take it away. And I would say be careful how we speak it. An example of that, just for parents, an example is maybe you have a daughter, and what's spoken over daughters? You're beautiful. You're every time you're beautiful. You're so beautiful. Your hair's so beautiful. Your clothes are so beautiful. And I remember working with a woman. She was an adult at this time, and she said, my identity is so wrapped up in my physical appearance that now I struggle with depression and anxiety because I'm trying to measure up to that affirmation that was spoken over me instead of implying and affirming characteristics of Christ.
That's a bar. I said it on the first episode. A bar, for those of you who don't know, is a rap term where a hotline has just been spoken. I love that. That is something I'm always cognizant of with, like you said, you're so pretty, and look at your shoes, and look at your hair, and look. You are gorgeous, you're intelligent, you're creative, you're strong, you're powerful, you're those affirmations.
You're assertive, you're a leader, you took initiative. They don't know what initiative is. You break it down. You begin to show them. You're polite, you're kind, you took the extra mile. I recognized what you did. Good job on, whatever it is. Doing those things, having discernment. What's discernment, Mom? You can break it down to a 6-year-old. Trust me.
Ooh.
You can break those things down. And then you begin to practice that in your own life as an
Talk.
adult.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say that. What are you speaking over yourself?
Doing. Yeah. We're creating healthy humans. And so now that we're in our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, then we know how to combat those negative things that come our way. It's not so much wrong that we have a negative thought that comes in, but it's how long that it stays is when it begins to destroy our lives. And so obviously there's so many dynamics to depression and anxiety. Some of those are chemical imbalances. Some of those are social and economical situations that have happened in our lives. And oftentimes it's the very words that were spoken that then we took on as our own, and we begin to speak the same. And so when I'm in therapy with people, I say you have to literally take the tape out of your head and replace it with a new tape. It doesn't happen overnight because you're so used to putting that on rewind and replay. And you got to take it out and you got to begin to speak those things over your life.
Ooh, what's your cash app?
Stop it, girl. She already hooked me up with a Fortitude smoothie not too long ago.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we're almost done, y'all. This could be a 4-hour conversation. You mentioned chemical imbalances, talking of course about the church and faith and psychology and theology. Medication. What are your thoughts on medication?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah.
I'm not a psychiatrist, so I do not prescribe medication.
Okay.
There are states who allow psychologists to have prescribing rights. I just have not chosen to get my prescribing rights. So psychologists focus on therapy, behavioral counseling, changing our thoughts, our behaviors, and really using some of those evidence-based practices. I'm a firm believer in a combination of both when needed. Medication, it doesn't mean you always have to be on medication. It doesn't mean you always have to be on both. Okay. But what medication does, if you think about a psychotropic medication, you have your anxiolytics, your antidepressants.
Hold on. Say it one more time.
Psychotropics.
Psychotropic.
Mental health meds.
Okay. I was going to play it off and be like,
mental health meds.
Your psychotropic, you got your analytics, you got your pharmaceuticals, you got your... Okay.
Just mental health medication.
Okay.
So
got it.
You've got your antidepressants, you have your anxiolytics, your anti-anxiety medications. So what begins to happen when you are using those medications? Now, obviously, don't ever do them without the care and direction of a professional. And I do encourage a psychiatrist. Oftentimes people go to their primary care because, again, there's the stigma. What if I go to a psychiatrist? Then that means I've crossed the line and there is something really wrong with me. But what oftentimes happens, it begins to change the neurotransmitters in your brain.
Okay.
So you think about dopamine, that is responsible for your mood. You think about serotonin, that's responsible for that, those endorphins and those happy euphoria feelings. And if those are off kilter, then you begin to take one of these medications and it can help level those things out. And before you know it, now you have the willpower, you have the motivation, you have some of those things that were keeping you confused, keeping you, loss of interest, lack of, energy, all those things, then it's a little more in alignment.
Okay.
And so then what begins to happen, and I'm a believer in this, medication alone, unfortunately, only serves as a Band-Aid. Ooh. So it's getting you, right? It's getting you to the place that you can then make a level decision. But the goal is that you're not dependent on a medication for the rest of your life, or perhaps some are, but you're not dependent on a medication to make those healthy decisions for you. And so therapy in combination with medication is where you begin to find the lasting results. So now, I'm a firm believer in, I don't know about you, but yesterday's sermon, I was
so good.
Typing every little note, you're my strength, I'm your joy, you're my happy, the pieces of the body of Christ. So it's the same way in therapy. What begins to happen is you're now given the tools and the skills to put these things into practice. And a quote that I came up with many years ago working in the prison was, you cannot build a storm shelter in the middle of a storm. So you have to have these tools in your toolbox. If you don't have 10 reasons for living, then guess what? When suicide hits you and you want to end your life, you're going to look in the mirror and say, nobody cares about me. I have no purpose. All I am is a burden, and they would be better off if I was gone. If you find yourself going down a road of depression, make yourself a list. 10 reasons why I'm living. 10 reasons why I have hope. 10 reasons why I need joy in my life. And so that's what therapy does. Evidence-based treatment, you come in, you begin to challenge those irrational beliefs that have caused you to believe a lie, that have caused you to look at a perspective from a wrong way.
Yeah.
And then you begin to challenge those, which ultimately gives you confidence, reduces your depression, increases your motivation, and helps you to have the willpower to reach your goals.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in a combination of both, especially in the beginning when things are really off kilter.
Yeah. Yeah. I love you so much.
I love you.
I feel like we have all of these isms in our lineage, in our pathology, in our DNA. I feel like there's a lot of information in DNA, and a lot of it's not your fault. You know, these things that we feel a lot of things are passed down. Not until I had conversations with my own mom. You know, I thought I was kind of going through things by myself, but kind of expressed what I was feeling. And she was like, I didn't know if you were telling your story or mine, because I went through that. So, but we have to talk about it. Let's change the trajectory of what's been in the past, and the secrecy and the silence and feeling that you're all alone. You are not alone.
Yeah.
We have all depression. I've experienced it.
Yes.
Addictions. Trying to lose it now.
Yes, all the things.
Trying to lose this weight now. We all deal with them. But please talk to somebody before you hurt yourself or someone else. And we talk about abuse, whether it's child abuse or domestic violence. I know being isolated because we've been quarantined and with COVID, and it's been tough.
Yeah.
It's been tough being in close quarters, and I would love to think that everybody's in an environment where it's like we're making cookies every day playing Uno
board games
and helping the kids with their It's not like that for everybody.
Yeah.
And so it is imperative that you get your self-help and help for people in your environment as well. I do not believe it is the Lord's will for you to be in an abusive relationship. I believe that you are to be protected and loved and cherished and valued. I also know that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to leave abusive relationships. It's difficult for kids to leave. I mean, if it's your parents, it's hard. But if you're in a domestic violence situation as well, we had a question about that. Get help. Talk to somebody.
And don't be a martyr. I think so often people say, well, it's my duty as a Christian and as a follower of Christ that I'm supposed to endure the cross. That is not what the Bible meant. It did not mean you stay in an abusive relationship. Not only are you creating a negative outcome for your future, you are setting up a toxic trajectory for your children, because now they do not know what it looks like to have a healthy relationship in the home. And I can guarantee you, when they walk out of the house, they're going to find whatever they can to get out of the situation, and ultimately they may find themselves back in the same situation because that's all they knew and all that they saw. And I like what you said. You said even kids. I worked in foster care, and it didn't matter how amazing that foster parent was. Do you know what the children wanted more than anything? They wanted that biological parent. That was normal to them. That was what they were used to. It didn't matter how toxic it was, how abusive it was. And so just be mindful that pulling out and setting boundaries and practicing tough love is not only going to help yourself, but it's going to help the people that you're really ultimately taking care of.
I love that. My dad told me an interesting story, actually, before we started today. He was talking with a young lady about her idea of God and who God is. And we've talked about this scripture before. How can you say that you love God who you've never seen, and you can't love your brother or sister who you see all the time? And we talk about that from an empathetic standpoint, but he brought up a good point about if I have a toxic view of my earthly father, it's almost impossible for me to have a healthy view of how God loves me. Yeah. And so to be patient with people, we are trying to really turn a big ship to reintroduce people to the love of God if they haven't seen love from an earthly father. Yeah. So I thought that was very, very interesting that, a lot of our ideas about who God is, a lot of people think He's
a strong judge, gonna beat you down.
And he's just wanting to correct everything. But God is a loving God. He's a good, good father. That should be a song. I should write it.
When you find yourself feeling a little too religious, you have to remind yourself that He loves you. He's called you. You're his child. It doesn't matter what you do. He's got your back. My husband does a really good job of reminding me that we serve a God of love.
Yes.
Like he loves us. He loves us.
Yes.
And just as much as we love our children, he loves us that much more.
That much more.
And he wants good for your life. And he wants to see you whole and healthy. And we can't do that by walking around in silence. We have to be open. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to have the hard conversations. And I think you'll be surprised that the more vulnerable you are, the more transparent you are, you're opening up a door for the people around you to feel safe and to feel comfortable. Because I can promise you, you rub shoulders with someone just in this church office alone that is struggling, that's suffering, that's hurting.
Absolutely.
And they're afraid. And what happens if I tell somebody? What does that mean? And how are people going to view me or see me? But when you begin to open the door, then they feel the freedom to do the same.
I love that. I feel like I've said I've loved that 30 times today. So anticipate joy. Anticipate joy. What is it again? How do we get in contact? This is a very practical resource that is available to you. Is it just for people who are in Texas? How does it work?
Just in Texas right now.
Okay.
So you can go to anticipatejoy.com. You can log on, begin to fill out the intake survey, and then there's therapists there. Dr. Tedderton and I are not the therapists on the platform. We're just adminning and over the platforms, but we have interviewed and vetted all of the therapists. It's very important to us that they represent Anticipate Joy, but that they also are diverse. So it's very important when you pick a doctor in the community, you want them to be diverse, whether that's age, gender, race, background, experiences. All those things are important.
Oh.
So when we're interviewing them and they come onto the platform, it's important that we select them in that way. So that you're able to select the benefits, or you can complete an intake survey, select a therapist, and begin engaging in therapy within a matter of 24 hours. It's convenient because you can do it within your own home, off your smart device or computer. You can literally be in your yoga pants. Maybe you're a single parent and you've got 3 kids, and how can I juggle this and get a babysitter and go across town to see a provider? You can put them to bed. Many of our therapists are available on the weekends, the evenings. Early mornings. So whether you choose Anticipate Joy or another therapist, I encourage you to find someone that's invested in helping you get the tools that you need to live a better quality of life. You deserve it. It's ultimately up to us. Nobody can do it for us. The water's here. We just got to drink it. So it's in front of our faces. Resources are available. I just appreciate you allowing me to speak this. Thank you for inviting me, because talking about mental health obviously is my passion. But I think our churches, our organizations, our society needs to know help is available and you don't need to suffer in silence.
I love you.
I love you so much.
This is so great. Thank you all again for joining us for another experience of Off the Record. We wish you well, and we will see you next time.
Blessings.